And what I'm going to do today is take you through a little bit of a story about, we've been talking about VNFs and NFV for a long time. By the way, there was no such thing as SD-WAN when NFV was started by Etsy about 6 years ago. But interestingly enough, there's a lot of activity around SD-WAN, and you'll see some of that in my presentation. So really, I'm going to talk about VNFs and how does it apply to, from a service provider perspective, what can you do to accelerate this concept that when you talk to very well about value-added services, what we're coining the term at Silver Peak as tiered services. So let's first of all look at service providers. In general, not just SD-WAN, managed services in the WAN, there's a lot of challenges for service providers. The number one challenge is that many service provider customers are migrating to broadband. Why? Because broadband is become more ubiquitous, it's lower cost, there's plenty of choice available. That creates an issue because the application mix and traffic as a service provider, how do you manage that diverse mix? So that's certainly something new, and one of the reasons why SD-WAN has emerged as one of those solutions. The hybrid WAN architectures that have existed for the past 10 years have become harder and harder to manage with the increasing use of cloud apps and the increasing use of broadband. So you combine all of that, it's very hard to adapt and migrate some of those WAN architectures. They are purpose-built networks, and for many of you who are service providers, trying to integrate all of those into a hybrid WAN hasn't been easy. The third point about infrastructure sprawl is that you need dedicated, purpose-built appliances for all of these functions, whether it be firewalls, as Prayson talked about, network security appliances, WAN optimization appliances, session border controllers, routers. All of these have been dedicated, specialized appliances. And so it's hard for service providers to continue to keep supporting and managing all of that physical equipment. Automation in this event is talking about automation. Obviously, a lot of progress has been made, but there's a lot of legacy networks, a lot of legacy systems that are out there, and there's still manual configurations. How do you deal with that challenge? And finally, there's OpEx and margin pressures. This is just a survey. I know it was done a little while ago, but it really shows you that in planning, this was done late 2016, that all of these different services, you can look at this list, managed router, WAN optimization, SD-WAN, this was late 2016, and only like 25 or 28%. But we're seeing all, enterprise customers want a diverse mix of managed services. That's not going to change even with virtualization, right? They still need those services. There's a need to have those types of services. How do you deal with that? Well, I'm going to pose a challenge here for service providers. Supporting multiple VNFs from different vendors is a pretty challenging area of responsibility. I mean, Prayson did a very good job at explaining what you can do. There's lots of solutions, but we've introduced more complexity as we've moved to virtualization. There is no standard programming language for VNFs. There's no Etsy VNF interface definition. So I'm just listing a number of other things. Often service providers have limited resources. How many people in your team know DevOps environments and all of these orchestration? Maybe people at this event do, but large numbers of service providers are facing challenges finding people or training the people. And then time to market to launch an individual VNF in itself has been challenging, as we've seen over the past 3 years. Trying to do multiple VNFs adds even more complexity. You've got to do testing, deployment, the whole lifecycle management, integrating different vendors. So I pulled this slide from SDX Central, did a survey of service providers back in 2017, and guess what? SD-WAN is the leading VNF use case. SD-WAN didn't exist 3 years ago until ONIG came up with this definition. But if you look at that, SD-WAN or virtual CPE, and there's a tight coupling between these two use cases, is the number one use case that most people in this survey are seeing, and it keeps increasing. So we all know that service providers are moving, especially the largest ones, and even tier twos. Some of our Silver Peak's tier two customers as well are moving towards a universal CP. Why? Because it offers a lot of benefits, lower cost, It's general purpose networking hardware, software, a lot of different benefits here, and you're simplifying your infrastructure or branch sprawl by having less numbers of physical devices. The idea to support multiple VNFs on a single white box is also certainly one of the objectives, but then again, time will tell if that's always optimized. What if you could build a better WAN edge to support, improve application performance and availability? So we in the industry like to talk about network functions, VNFs, but the enterprise customers of service providers are really concerned about application performance and availability. And that becomes one of the most important requirements you have to look at when you're looking at this whole wide area network and the edge in that network. You need to look at broadband, high availability, sub-second failover. You're going to be using broadband, you're going to be using MPLS, LTE, satellite links, in the future 5G. It doesn't matter. It shouldn't matter. The application should perform at the highest level over any underlying network, regardless of where you are. So simplifying the WAN is all about what we want, what service providers really are trying to do with this universal CP, lowering that CapEx, lowering the number of, combining functions into one device, like SD-WAN, routing, WAN optimization, or firewall. What if you could do all that in a single device, on one VNF in one virtual machine? And then you still need all the other features of orchestration and being able to provision these services, because at the end of the day, you want to be able to turn up services faster than your competitor, because with SD-WAN, it's an overlay technology. If your customer can't get that service faster from you, they're going to go somewhere else. They can switch over very easily. And then this whole idea of steering traffic by the application, where the best network's available, and as Wenyu was pointing out clearly, SaaS optimization is going to become an increasingly important area in all markets, not just in Japan, but we believe that's going to be an area important. So if you look at a legacy branch here, typically today you have routers that are running in the wide area network. Almost every enterprise has some form of that device with a firewall. There may or may not. And you have this kind of environment where today with SD-WAN, you need to be able to operate in a mixed environment. So you could have a legacy branch. You could have SD-WAN branches where the routing function, in the case of Silver Peak, is already built in, BGP and OSPF routing already in an SD-WAN appliance. So you could be running in a hybrid mode where there's some MPLS sites, some SD-WAN sites. That's the real world. For most service providers, there's not that many greenfield networks, even with existing enterprises. So you have to be able to understand, adapt, and learn with those networks, with the underlying technology. And at the end of the day, you want to, and many of your customers, since we see a lot of enterprise deployments of SD-WAN, more and more of those enterprises want a simplified branch. They like to see the thin edge where there's less complexity and they can combine a number of functions like shown here, the firewall and routing. So let's look at one of the things that's really important as you look at SD-WAN. And SD-WAN can be a platform for a lot of these different types of new tiered services. So I'm just going to take you through the whole idea of business intent overlays. It's looking at overlays or virtual network functions, or and looking at overlays and VLANs, if you want to call it in the LAN terminology. And what we've done at Silver Peak is built an intelligent policy and overlay engine. We call it business intent overlays because you have all of these different parameters from different types of looking at the applications, looking at the networks that you have available, and suiting the network to the application rather than the other way around. And so whether you're using in this example, you have real-time applications, you want to have a number of different knobs, if you want to call them that, to adjust, to adapt. You adapt the network. You can create SLAs based on classes of applications or by individual applications. So all these real-time applications require a mesh topology, voice, interactive video, et cetera. So you have a real-time QoS. You may trust these applications. You may not. So you have a security policy, and you may not need, for those applications, you may not need WAN optimization. For enterprise applications, in this class here, we're showing, again, mixed types of networks. You can have 2 or 3 different networks. You can keep them all active, and let the applications run simultaneously, sort of load sharing, and there's some technology behind that. The whole idea here is that, in this case, some of those applications may have latency issues in different parts of the world. So you may need to turn on in that checkbox WAN optimization, and that can be turned on and off by a service provider, or they may even allow an enterprise to do that in a co-managed environment. The web traffic is a good place, and we heard NTT talk about this. Local internet breakout is probably one of the most important use cases that we see. And for service providers to be able to be the trusted advisor or provider, you can break out trusted traffic to the local internet by looking at the packets that are coming in and immediately steering that by the application. Or you can, if you need to, you can send it to a firewall where required. It depends on the security policies. And finally, things like guest Wi-Fi, where retail stores and a lot of businesses, as we know, and not just in the US, in many parts of the world, we have guest Wi-Fi. You want to drop traffic and not compromise your business applications. And if you're using firewall security policies, you may even send that back if it's to a hosted firewall. Again, this is just some more detail in the interest of time. Really, at the end of the day, it's up to every service provider, but if you can demonstrate in the local internet breakout in this, how you can handle SaaS applications, literally any application, and Silver Peak has some very interesting technology called First Packet, where after the first packet, we break out that traffic, and you can, based on security policies, you can send that traffic to any one of these 3 different ways. We partner with security vendors, best serve it by doing service chaining. So many of our service provider customers like Interroute and others are now service chaining, for example, Palo Alto with Silver Peak's SD-WAN, and they have it operationalized. They have customers that are already doing both the best taking a best of breed SD-WAN with the best of breed of security. So let's talk about transition and what does this mean from a service provider? Well, for service provider today, as Prayson showed, and I know his slide was a little bit outdated, he didn't have all of our service provider recent customers, but he had showed there a lot of different service providers have deployed SD-WAN. Some of them are deploying their 2nd or 3rd SD-WAN solution. But the end of the day is going to be, you need to offer differentiation value add. So one of the things that I think for service providers going forward is how do you get your customer, or how can you offer additional value-added features? In this example, the base SD-WAN, from our perspective for a service provider, should be able to deliver SLAs over any type of underlying network and should be able to operate in any geography. And from the perspective of service provider, to sustain and to keep your differentiation, you should be able to improve application performance. We have some service providers in production with SD-WAN where their MPLS network went down for 3 or 4 hours. In production environment, their customer had no idea. The applications were transparently, in a hitless environment, moved over to another network. That's really the real world, and that's really what we think a base SD-WAN platform really needs to be able to support for the service provider. If you go to the middle, WAN optimization and performance optimization and SaaS optimization that some of the previous speakers talked about are really important in today's world. And so you can't always eliminate latency, so you need that capability, and it's all available in software. As a service provider, you don't want to have to be able to send a tech person out to that branch site. It should be automatically available, and it should be a pay-as-you-go, as we move forward into the cloud world, and it should be all in software. And finally, as service providers have more rich telemetry data available to them, the Formula One example was a good one that we heard earlier, that you should be able to leverage those and provide analytics and visibility services to your customers so that you can optimize that and actually provide reporting services that you can show how the applications are performing on a value-added basis. That's a chargeable service. Some service providers, some of our existing service provider SD-WAN partners, customers are already doing that and starting to plan for those kinds of service offerings. And finally, even security is, as we heard, there's different levels of security. As a service provider, you want to be able to offer consulting or services that give you visibility into how and where those applications are going, and that works well and partnering with your security services team. So just time to sort of visualize this. Today, many managed service providers still operate or offer, they may have a managed router offering, managed MPLS, DIA. All of these are different groups. Often they're different product managers and different folks, and managed security. And what I'm trying to show is that's the existing way we do things. We've just taken, all we're doing with virtualization is taking those and virtualizing. That's fine if you want to do that. What we think service providers really need to move is move into the value-added and differentiated service. Advanced SD-WAN, being able to handle and manage SaaS optimization and performance and optimize performance regardless of how the network's performing, and this visibility analytics are all value-added services you can charge customers. Our enterprise customers that we also sell to, and we have over 700 production global SD-WAN enterprise customers, so we have a lot of experience to back that up, are asking for more and more managed services. They were looking for more of this as the market matures. So as I started at the beginning of the presentation, perhaps one VNF, because all of what I talked about, those 4 functions, SD-WAN, WAN optimization, stateful firewall, routing, can be run on one VNF, one virtual machine. So is one better than 4? In the world of looking at this is where you really want to go. These are just some examples of different tiered services that you can add on top of SD-WAN. Unified communication, cloud connect and cloud optimization, SaaS optimization. And so the idea here is a service provider, you want more revenue per customer. You want higher stickiness, higher customer stickiness. And it's up to you now, depending on the platform you choose, because there's over 50 SD-WAN vendors. And there's only a few of us who are really the market leaders. Fortunately, I think we're in a good position at Silver Peak. We can support all of these use cases that you see here in a tiered manner. And a single WAN edge, SD-WAN, VNF, I'm here to say that this can bring you revenue, faster time to market. We partner with many white box vendors, Dell, ADVA, Juniper Networks, Telco Systems, Ciena, number of them. So the ability to go to market faster, that's what it's all about. SD-WAN, as many of the service provider partners we talk to, many of them are seeing 100% or 90 to 100% of enterprise RFPs requesting SD-WAN. That's changed from maybe 70 to 80% last year. So this is the time to look at trying to make things simpler, and maybe today I hope I shared with you some ideas or food for thought. Thanks.